Hi, and welcome to House Proud. I'm Nadia, and I'm walking in the streets of Kingston Gardens. That's right. Why? Well, this particular area has traditional Jamaican dwelling houses. Beautiful fretwork, the architecture, everything. Who are we having on the show today? Pat Green, architect and also heritage professional. So don't go away. Lots of excitement on the streets of Kingston Gardens. What a bright sunny day. Boy, is it ever hot out here. Yep, we're back. Thanks for watching. And yes, I am in Kingston Gardens, and with me is Pat Green. Hi, Pat.
Hi,
How
Nadia.
are you?
Welcome
Good to see
my
you.
Kingston Garden.
Yes, thank you. This is first, and I tell you, well, tell us, tell our viewers, what is so spectacular about the architecture here in Kingston Gardens?
Okay, well, one of the key things is that it's Jamaican traditional dwelling houses. This entire area has been called Jamaica's first suburb because you may know that Kingston originally stopped at North Street, which is where the Gleaner Company is, and that is one of the boundaries of Kingston Gardens. So Kingston Gardens really comprises of 4 main roads. This is West Avenue, and facing me is East Avenue. On my left is North Avenue and South Avenue. So this is how they divide the first suburb in North, South, East, and West.
Right.
Okay?
But with the houses, the dwelling houses in particular, I know you're into features, elements in particular. For example, the fretwork. So that, we're going to get deeper into that as we walk the streets.
I think that this area has such a wonderful, it is a repository of so many different details of fretwork and the development of fretwork architecture in Jamaica. In fact, as we go through, we'll see some of them. And I'd like to pick up on some elements because things have changed over the years. A lot of people have changed their houses, they have added features, they have taken off some things. But if you look very deep, you will see some of the elements which today people are replicating in doing their modern houses. Sometimes some of the colors, they are now beginning to turn their own houses into different kind of historic colors and stuff. And whereas we can see them right here in Kingston Gardens.
Well, Pat, God, it's so hot out here today.
Oh.
I think we're going to lose a lot of weight walking on the streets.
Oh my goodness, I brought my fan,
Lucky
Nadia.
Well, you ready?
Yes.
I'm ready. Follow us.
Okay, great. Nadia, you notice outside the fence was white, but it's actually a brick fence. And in this area, we've actually kept the bricks so you can see some of the old yellow oak, the traditional colors that they would normally have used on these buildings. In fact, a lot of people are doing their interiors and they're trying to replicate this color.
Yes, that's right.
And they have artists actually painting it.
Yeah.
It's very exciting. And as you go around this house, you will see some details on it, such as this burglar bar on the veranda. This burglar bar was actually a pattern of the traditional wooden lattices that they would have on these old-time dwelling houses. We will see one at the back.
Some later on.
Yes.
Okay.
And if you notice that this house fronts onto the very wide West Avenue. So as we go up through the house and we go to the back, we will see the other street, which is called Conrad Lane. And then there you have small little houses. In fact, on this property, there are 2 buildings, one that fronts on West Avenue and another on Conrad Lane.
I want to ask you, Pat, as we were mentioning fretwork, the fretwork that's, above the doors, is that a traditional or is that a modern day kind of fretwork that has been adapted?
It is a more recent, because a lot of the earlier fretwork would have come just after the abolition of slavery, and it evolved out of the techniques and patterns of the liberated Africans.
Oh, really?
So you have the more detailed, intricate ones. It looked like crochet.
Yes.
But then by the time you got into the 1940s, 50s, you have this kind of pattern coming, okay? As we go, just take a look at what we call pebble dash.
Yes.
Here you have this kind of very rough kind of texture. A lot of people use it on their houses, but it was a common
Ceilings
feature.
as well, eh?
And
Inside.
ceilings. But this was a common technique that is used in traditional houses, dwelling houses. And notice again the yellow oak finish on it. So as we go right to the back
Pat, you've even done the grill work on the outside
Yes.
to capture also what is on the front.
Yes, it is the same. These are window boxes in front of the traditional double hung sash windows. There are lots of Jamaican stories about these windows because, you know, the cord inside would break. So they would have to use a piece of board or something to hold up the windows when they open it. And there are stories about these pieces of boards being used for whipping, you know, when children are naughty.
Well, I was never naughty, Pat, so I don't know.
Nor was I, Nadia. There is usually another little building on these properties that open out onto the lane. Now, as you look at this little building, Nadia, it hasn't really changed over the years. And you can see here the traditional wooden lattice.
right.
It's so pretty. All the details. Well, that's what we replicated for the new security details. Nadia, look at this a little closer. Notice that you have a piece of the timber here. These buildings were traditionally made of timber, so they would have a timber frame, that's what they're called, and they were called nog buildings. So you would put up the timber and then you would infill them with mortar, so it was a lime. And if you notice very closely here, this is really brick. Because after the 1907 earthquake, when most of Kingston was destroyed, a lot of the brick buildings were destroyed, and they had so much brick that they broke it up to make the aggregate to fill the buildings. So they would have the timber frame and then this mortar, and then they would daub it over with the pebble dash. All these houses that fronted on the main road, you notice how wide the road is?
Yeah.
There was a big park in front, and then at the back of each of these houses, all of them had a lane. This one is called Conrad Lane. Many very important Jamaican families have actually come from this area, and some of them have memories of Conrad Lane.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Well, I'm so eager. I want to see what the lane's all about.
Okay. Yes, Nadia, so here we have the lane.
Zinc fence. Another typical traditional Jamaican thing, eh?
Yes, it is. In fact, in doing this, you kept some of the features of inner city urban. But this community of Kingston Gardens is really very interesting. It's one of the most quiet neighborhoods in Kingston, and it has a mixture of residences as well as offices. So you have a number of offices and a number of persons living there on a full-time basis, and they dwell harmoniously, you know. So as we go now, let's look on the lane. This is so interesting here. Look at that pretty little house. You notice the fretwork is over the door. It's called a transom. And there's something very special about them, Nadia. Because it was of African tradition, in the past they would have said that, oh, this is Obi and they're working Obi and things like that.
Really?
So a lot of the people would start the fretwork with a cross. So you will see the cross in the center of it. And the patterns were very interesting because they started in the center there, and then they flipped up and they flipped down depending on the width and length, and they flipped sideways on both sides as well. And this one actually has the little fret on the edges of the veranda columns, you know. And those little crisscross, we see them so common today. This one has the vertical and horizontal lattice, and then you have the diagonal lattice, you know. So this is a lovely example of the different types of techniques.
Pat, how old are some of these houses?
Oh, these houses, most of them in this particular lane, in fact, date back to the post-1907 earthquake, right? But the ones on Kingston Garden are 19th century, because the suburb was actually laid out from the 19th century.
What about the actual design of these homes? Who was responsible for it back
That's
then?
the beauty and importance of these. It's the work of traditional Jamaican craftsmen. You see, so this is why we need to preserve it, because what we're doing is destroying a lot of the techniques and the craftsmanship of our grandparents.
And for example, this particular house here, this looks as if it's been refurbished, modernized, but it still has that element of a traditional Jamaican.
Nadia, look at this fence. It's so interesting. You talk about craftsmanship. What they did was just to use ordinary steel bars, and they would bend them into different patterns and make this intricate fence. You know, that's what we're talking about. Look at this pretty fence. I just love the colors and how, you know, the people have actually preserve the buildings by, one, they continue to live in them, which gives it extra life, and two, they paint them and fix them up and plant them up, and it looks so pretty.
Our dwelling houses here in Kingston Gardens will be considered heritage.
It is. In fact, many people have said that the Jamaica National Heritage Trust, who is the authority responsible for the preservation of historic buildings and the nomination of them for preservation, should actually list certain sections or maybe the entire Kingston Gardens as a heritage district, a historic district.
Do the tenants of these dwelling houses preserve their homes?
Yes, Nadia, you know, when you say tenants, a lot of the people actually own the houses, some people rent them, and they have preserved it. The mere fact that they live in them is an act of preservation. Look at this lovely old one. This is one of the oldest buildings in here with beautiful details.
When you say oldest, how old, Pat?
This building could easily be 19th century with a single pitched hip roof. Remember the gable roof, but
Yes.
this one has a single pitch hip roof. And when you look at the columns on the veranda, they are of the Doric design, which is a very classic period of design. So, you know, this has all the elements, but then added to it is the Jamaica vernacular of the fretwork and, you know, the double hung sash windows. Now, one of the interesting things about this, my goodness, I didn't realize it was still here. You have the black and white tiles.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, so many 18th century buildings in Spanish Town and in the older great houses have these old time tiles.
Pat, this particular house just looks like a wedding cake.
Oh, Nadia,
Eh?
I agree with you. I would call it the wedding cake in Kingston Gardens. Altamont de Costa, it's now called the Altamont de Costa building, but it belonged to Mr. de Costa, who was a wealthy merchant in downtown Kingston. And after the 1907 earthquake, he built this as a showpiece. It was built about the 1920s, that kind of period. And he used the finest of all the craftsmanship and techniques available at that time in Jamaica. You can see the details on the roof eaves. You know, they are exaggerated dentils and modillions of the classical period. Even the columns are of a classical style architecture, but you know, the scale is different from the classical. The fencing was imported, everything was just grand. So, I mean, this was really quite a showpiece. And in fact, there's a photograph of Mr. de Costa in the Institute of Jamaica standing with his brand new Ford motor car in front of his house just when he opened it.
What? I see a well. I don't know if they still use it. I doubt it very much, but...
Nadia, you're so perceptive. Do you know that a lot of the people who built houses in suburbs actually had their own wells?
Really?
Yes, and the poor people had to buy water in Kingston. So you had water carts that went up and down the streets that sold water. So Mr. de Costa had his well, like a lot of the other residents in Kingston Garden at that time. Now, Mr. de Costa's building actually set the tone for a number of other kinds of development of the period. But it still stands out even today as being most spectacular and significant. The architecture of the past came up and design evolved out of the traditions of the people in order to withstand earthquakes, to withstand hurricanes. And you notice the buildings in Kingston Gardens, they've been here, some of them from the 19th century, and they're still standing. They have retained their roof. In fact, if you see, one of the buildings next door has a pressed tin roof, and when Altamont de Costa building was built, it would have had the same kind of roof. So this pressed tin roof has been standing for many generations, although we've had so many different hurricanes.
Well, I gotta go get me some water. All this walking, I'm just so exhausted right now. Don't go away. When you come back, Pat has so much more in store.
Nadia,
I love this house,
it
Pat.
is so
Such a
nice.
cute brick home.
Nadia, it is so lovely. Do you know that this is one of the few remaining brick buildings in Kingston Garden? Oh, Nadia, this brick building has coins. Do you see them on the corners of the buildings?
What kind of coins?
I bet you think it is dollars and
Yes.
cents. No, man, it's an architectural term. It's
Okay.
spelled Quoins. Quoins is the correct spelling. Anyway, look in the dictionary. But it's on the corner of the brick buildings. And usually these coins are made out of limestone.
Oh.
So it is a great architectural feature to put the brick and the limestone together. The veranda columns are really special on this building. And it has a little turret roof with this beautiful octagonal shape on the veranda. Fantastic. This is a precious little Kingston Garden dwelling house.
You know we have humpback whales. Well, it's the first I heard that we have a humpback roof.
Oh gosh. Nadia, these are just called humpback, meaning the two-story building is actually almost sitting on top of the single-story building. And this little stretch here, these buildings are like about 1920s, 30s, that kind of period, 40s. But it has so much of the details carried over from the 19th century. And where they had the main house, the single story, and then they would just do an extension and just add a double story behind and just connect the double story into. So it's called humpbacking. Nadia, look at the fretwork on the eaves. Isn't that pretty? They call it the barge board or the eave board. And this house has the detail, although lots of things have changed, like the aluminium windows, but you can still see the essence of the traditional dwelling house behind it. I think this is the only example in our Kingston Garden that still has these little verge boards or fretwork barge boards as they are called.
This particular house, Pat, is so unique in its own right. You know, it just, the shape, the whole angle where the staircase is to go into the house, and those particular columns as well are unlike the ones that we've seen gone by.
Nadia, I allowed you to talk because it is so interesting to hear your perspective on it. I love this building as well. You hear how many times I say I love this building?
Yes, the whole of Kingston Garden.
Oh, but you know what is so precious about this one, Nadia? If you look at the fretwork on it, oh goodness me, remember we spoke about the cross in the fretwork? This one is a much later, I would believe this is about a 50s, late 50s, oh it would be early 50s, because after the 1951 Hurricane Charlie, they began to change the building techniques in Jamaica, and that's when you got the introduction of the concrete slab roof, you know? So before the 1951, you had a proliferation of all of these buildings. And the fretwork on this one, it's like a little fruit basket, and you have like fruits and grapes coming out of it, and it is so cute. Some prominent Jamaican families used to live in Kingston Garden, like Wilzo Isaacs, former Minister of Industry, and others, you know. So the entire neighborhood has a long history of Jamaican personalities and, you know, people who have evolved from this very community and have made substantial contribution to the development of Jamaica as a nation. Yes, Nadia, look at this. This is called a piazza. You see that jalousie, the little wooden like louvers, they're called jalousies. And if you notice the brick stopped at one side and then the wooden part, well, this building is a piazza building. It's a beautiful example of Jamaica Georgian architecture. Jamaica Georgian evolved in the late 18th century and into the early part of the 19th century. So this big building actually was before the 1907 earthquake, and it survived. Nadia, just look behind you. You see the cannon? Oh my goodness.
Why is it sitting there?
And it's upside down.
And it's upside down.
They planted it on the sidewalk, or because in the old days they didn't really have these curb walls. So when the carriages and the people were going around, they would put it there to protect the edges of the building.
You said curb wall, you mean the sidewalk?
Yes.
Okay, okay. That's the term for it too.
Yes,
Okay.
it's also
Alright.
a term.
Pat, this has been such a splendid day, trudging through Kingston Garden and learning so much about the Jamaican vernacular and Georgian architecture. Tell me in a summary though about it.
Nadia, It's just amazing that we have such a rich heritage of Jamaican architectural craftsmanship and traditions. The Jamaica Georgian was an earlier time, coming in the 18th into the 19th century. And after the abolition, we have the Jamaica vernacular with all the fretwork and all the intricacies that we have seen in Kingston Gardens. So I think it's really, the architecture is just showcasing our Jamaican people and our craftsmen.
Yeah.
And so much has been embodied in this trip. And I'm so glad you were able to come and share it with us.
I'm so glad too. And I think we should really preserve our Jamaican architecture.
Yes, thank you so much.
Well, we've come to the end of yet another episode and a season. That's right, time sure does fly when we're having fun. So, until we meet again, not sure when that's going to be though. May God bless your home. This is Nadia signing out for House Proud. Ciao for now. Hi. Authentic Jamaican traditional dwelling houses. Where can we find them? Kingston Gardens. I am Nadia. Join me in my next episode of House Proud, where Pat Green and myself walk the streets to showcase some of these really spectacular dwelling homes. See you then.